Evening and welcome to another part of COVID-19, but we're going to talk today about Saving Ourselves Part 2. The NAACP Monroe County is sponsoring this under the leadership of Krista Casares, Mrs. Krista Casares, and her guests will be Senator Mario Scavello, Julian Parker, that's who it's going to be, and I'm so glad that she has all these people set on there, and it'll be Senator Mario Scavello, Juliana Parker, the Governor Advisor Commission on African American Affairs, U.S. Congressman Susan Wild, Senator State Representative Maureen Madden, and Miss Erica McCabe from the Strasburg Borough Council, Jennifer Lyons, Chief of Strasburg Area Regional Police, and Kasim Johnson, founder of the George Floyd Memorial March, as well as the Mayor of Strasburg, Tara Probst. She's the Mayor of Strasburg, Pennsylvania. And as they're preparing to come in to you live, I just want to tell you this is going to be an exciting time. I encourage you that, especially on here from the Monroe County, Pennsylvania area, to share this page with someone right here. You're going to hear a lot of things that's going to come on and a lot of answers to some questions, as well as hear what they're trying to do to make our area better, our state and our community better. And that's what we're about, is building relationships and building hope and helping people to know that if we work together, sit down and reason and talk together, we can get some things done. I'm so grateful for all of you that are joining us on Facebook and YouTube Live. Please, ma'am, please share this page. You won't regret it. It is also good to know that these are the people that are on that are also our elected officials, and you get to hear more from them. So as you go to the poll and you have to make a decision on who you shall vote for, you have heard from some of them. It is my responsibility, I feel, as a leader and a pastor in our community, as well as to my church, to bring you the best information I can that will help you to make the right decisions at the right time, and then to know who's who in your community. And as well as there are other faith leaders in our community that are doing great things also. It's more than just me. There are other great faith leaders that are leading people and giving them information and guiding them and showing what they can have this offer to them and what we have to offer as a people collectively. As we come together in unity and in strength, we come together letting people know there's power when we come together. There's strength when we come together. There's a lot more peaceful things that can happen when you come together. And there's understanding when you're able to sit at the table and reason together. I'm just excited about all of that. And I'm so glad to see Sonia Cotman. I'm so glad you're on here today. And to all of you from In His Presence Ministry of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, thank you for joining us. And all of those that are joining us from Atlanta and around the world, thank you for joining us today. And it's so good to have you on here. To those that are young, please get your young men and women to join us, because Mr. Kasim is going to be on here today. And he will be talking to us from the standpoint of some of the young people and what we may have missed. Yes, we can miss some things. And that's what it's about, learning also. Learning whatever we can learn to gain better respect for one another and to be able to share better in the lives of others. Again, I encourage you, hey there, Ms. Zula, I'm encouraging you to share this page with someone else. It is the Monroe County NAACP presents Saving Ourselves Part 2. I was on the first one. It was really good, and I was part of that panel, but the guests, again, are Senator Mario Scavello, Juliana Parker, Governor Advisor for the Commission on African American Affairs, U.S. Congressman Susan Wild, then there's State Representative Maureen Madden, and then there's Miss Erica McCabe, Strasburg Borough Council, Miss Jennifer Lyons, Chief of the Strasburg Area Regional Police Department, Mr. Kasim Johnson, the founder of the George Floyd Memorial March, and Tara Probst of Strasburg, who is the mayor of Strasburg. So it promises to be very informational for you, and you will gain a lot of things from it. And then it will help you if you're doing some things in your own community. It should inspire you to want to do something that can make a difference and bring people together at a place of reasoning at the table. It's not just enough just to go to church and to come out, but it's about not only just going to church and coming out, but giving of your services and being an ear or a voice to someone else to help them to make sure we get the right decisions in place, that we care for everyone in our community, and we know who we always say who's on first and who's on second and who's hitting the home runs, but you need to know who your elected officials are. And because we are a bedroom community here in the Poconos, because we get up and we get on our buses early in the morning to travel back and forth to the city, New York or New Jersey, and even Philadelphia, We don't always get to know who our elected officials are, but tonight you'll get to hear them. You'll get to hear them. And as you'll get to hear them talk, from the state senator to the congresswoman to the state rep to the borough council, the chief of the the Strasburg area regional police department, and then certainly from our own mayor, Tara Probst of Strasburg, Pennsylvania. We'll get to hear them talk, and it will make a great difference for all of you that are on here. I'm encouraging you again to get people to join. You may not live in our state or in our region, but the same situations sometimes apply in other areas. What we're dealing with, you're dealing with also. Some of you are dealing with it from a city perspective that has to be handled differently. Some are living in towns and communities, and that's a whole different way of dealing with some situations. Because the way you handle things in the city does not always work when you're in the town. But I'm so grateful today, that we can, put some things together. So here it is. I've been watching the news as you all have, and today I was listening to the president who said we would have never known about Juneteenth had he not made it famous. And I was like, wow, that was something to hear. And it kind of blew my mind, but okay, that's what he stated, but I know we knew better. And I want to tell you that was something to discuss. And this is why it's very important that you take the time to talk with your young people, talk to your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, talk with them, let them know the history, let them know their history and where we have overcome and how we've overcome. And he made it like once he said it, it was like brand new news and we all jumped on board. But no, listen, that's been something we've been knowing for a mighty long time. And his people signed off on it for 3 years straight. So I don't know how it just became fresh news, but it was something to think about. And then we thank God that as people have been marching and protesting, they have been very peaceful, and we thank God for that, and we want to continue to keep it like that, for there are so many things that are going on in our community, and so many of us that are connected to those who are protesting and marching, and we need to pray for their safety, pray that they practice safe things, wear their masks, try to keep as much of a safe distance as they can. And we need to, really try to put that into practice. And so those are some of the things that I'm thinking about as we're waiting for them as they're preparing to come on. And when they do, we'll be ready. I also want to encourage you as you're going out to practice safety by wearing your mask. I know there's a thing about we don't need to wear it. There's no need. And somebody said that someone thought that the virus was going away. It has not gone away. It's still here. And we have to be safe in what we do. And let us not be fooled by what others say. It's important for you to take care of yourself, especially those of us that have underlying sicknesses, and we are some of those of color, because it is gripping us in great proportions. So it is something for us to think about, something for us to continue to deal with, and we need to make sure that we are a part of practicing taking care and being safe. All right. Having said that, and I'm so excited about this that's about to happen, Mr. Kasim Johnson, the founder of the George Floyd Memorial March, had one about 2 weeks ago, and it was a very successful march from the Dansbury Park all the way to this town square in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. And there were so many people that came out. That's why I'm hoping that you get your young men and women to look and watch us, because he's a young man that has a vision and a dream, and he's a part of that panel discussion, as well as Jennifer Lyons, the Chief Strasburg Area Regional Police woman, who's on here, will be on here tonight, and she is really working hard to work within the community. We are blessed to have the relationship that we have with our police department, and we want to continue to keep that. And so it's a great thing to say. It's good to have her on as one of the panelists. State Rep Maureen Madeline, PA of the 115th District, she's going to be on today, and they're working endlessly to work with some of the young men and women to find that middle ground that we can all come together with, as well as Senator Mario Scavello of Pennsylvania of the 40th District, and he's going to be on here, and he's going to be talking today. And so there's a lot of people coming on that they really want to sit down and try to pull together, that we can sit down at this table and come together and reason and make some things happen. I'm very excited about that. I'm so excited that Ms. Krista Caceres, and then NAACP was able to do it. And we are just showing it as a part of our community watch on this. And we want to share with the community what's going on in the faith community. And while we're doing that, there's others that are doing some great things. And there are other marches that will be taking place. And throughout this week, there is Enough is Enough young people. They're going to be on from, I think theirs is from 12 to 3 or 3 to 6. I'm not sure, but I'll have that for you later on. And they say enough is enough. So they're showing you that we're ready to make some things happen. And I've noticed that there are more young men and women going back, ordering many black books on how to deal with about racism, how to deal with racism, how did it start, where did it come from, even back to finding out about their ancestors in slavery. It is so important to know this because this is nothing new. What we're dealing with is a repercussion of not always continuing the fight as we ought to. Sometimes we think that we have arrived and we put it aside and we say we don't need certain things anymore, or we forget about it, and we should not. It should be that you know, and I'm going to say share, that we don't share what we know or what we have heard, our grandparents tell us. All of those things are very important for the generation we have today. And we want to talk to our children and let them know that they are very powerful and they are someone great and they come from a great bloodline. And I want to encourage you again, I cannot say it enough, to take this time to share and get as many on. I need you to share this on your Facebook page and share this with your YouTube people. Please, ma'am, please, sir. We want to bring those numbers up. It is the fact that when they see that you have a number of viewers that are concerned enough to listen and want to hear what they have to say, they have to rethink, think. And that's how you make it happen. I want to share that with you right now. Don't just decide, oh, I'm not going to stay on. I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear Jesus. Well, here is Jesus. Listen, learn your community. Learn them well. Learn the people around you. And even if you're not in the community, still listen, still pray for what you're about to hear, and you'll know how to pray for somebody else when your community is doing well. And should you need to put this together in your own community, you can watch and learn something from it. So I'm encouraging you. Please, ma'am, I'm about to share it again on my page. We're sharing it again. That's the moment. I want to make sure I do that. And I thank all of you that are doing the same. Share this page, and I want to welcome you. For those of you who are new to coming in, what you're watching is we're preparing for our Save Our Lives. Amen. Excuse me. Saving Ourselves, Part 2, Law Enforcement and Elected Officials Virtual Town Hall Meeting. That's what's going to happen in a few minutes, and I want you to be a part of it. And I would like for you all to share this page with as many people as you can. Get some more people to come on, let the numbers continue to go up. It'll be worthwhile. I need your support, all of Reaching Out for Jesus Christian Center. I need your support. Get on there, and I need you to get on and invite your friends to join us. Thank you, Dr. Coburn, Deacon Coburn. Thank you all for being on here with us. Those that are joining us on YouTube now, thank you. But we need your support tonight, and we need you to get on and get your number, get the people to come on. You've been faithful with it. You've been following us. I know this is your off night. We usually do it on Tuesday, but this is a very special virtual town hall meeting. And we're going to find out some things, okay? And I want to say to you that as we're doing that and getting things together, please, ma'am, please, sir, do not be fooled in thinking again that this virus is over. It is long not over. We still have a ways to go. We are grateful that most of us will be going into the green here in Pennsylvania, and we are looking for some great things to happen, but be careful and be safe. I cannot stress it enough, and I'm just waiting to hear, but as I'm waiting to hear, I want to share with you that it's just good to have you on here. I'm glad to have you on here. I'm going to tell you, we have some fantastic panelists tonight. Senator Mario Scavello, Juliana Parker, U.S. Congressman State Susan Wild, State Representative Maureen Madden, Erica McCabe, and Jennifer Lyons, Kasim Johnson, Tara Probe. I'm so excited to say they're going to be on with us shortly. And thank you. It's not over by any means. Somebody just texted me back and said, it's not over by any means. No, it isn't. And the numbers are rising. They're rising. And they're rising all over in Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, and they're rising. And that's why I want you to take note. Please, ma'am, please, sir, take note. Take care of yourself. And when you're going out, enjoy yourself, but practice, be safe in what you're doing. That's why I keep coming back to this. Be safe in what you're doing. Thank you. I've seen people respond back. I do appreciate that. That's right. Thank you so much, Dr. Werner. Okay, so I'm grateful that you're joining it. So it's a lot going on. There's a lot that has happened, and with the people in Atlanta and the police officers, and I pray for their families too. I pray for. Okay, we get ready to tune in now live. They're starting now.
13 News for sharing stories about our event and providing sound coverage of all the recent events, vigils, prayer services, protests, and resulting events following the death of Mr. George Floyd. In an article on the history of policing, Chelsea Hansen wrote, "The American South relied almost exclusively on slave labor, and white Southerners lived in near constant fear of slave rebellions disrupting this economic status quo. As a result, these slave patrols were one of the earliest and most prolific forms of early policing in the South. The responsibility of patrols was straightforward: to control the movements and behaviors of enslaved populations. According to historian Gary Potter, slave patrols served three main functions. First, to chase down, apprehend, and return to their owners' runaway slaves. Two, to provide a form of organized terror to deter slave revolts. And three, to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers who were subject to summary justice outside the law. While the purpose of law enforcement has evolved over the years, and we have come to rely upon them to keep us safe and apprehend the bad guys, we must be honest and acknowledge there are bad guys in law enforcement, and there is a system in place that must be changed. We believe that we can honor the inherent danger that comes with working in law enforcement while demanding that all people be treated equally and with respect. We must acknowledge that thousands of brave men and women go to work every day to protect and serve, but not ignore the white supremacists and some racists who work among them that have their own agenda when they come to work every day. Overall, our community enjoys a strong relationship with our leaders in local law enforcement and state police, but there is always room for improvement. It is crucial that communities and their police departments work together for the good of all in the community. There have been concerns in the past regarding profiling in our area and a desire to see more officers of color on the area forces and in their leadership. Having representation on all levels of leadership in our community will work to strengthen us even more, and I'm confident that we will begin to see moves in the right direction. I would like to acknowledge the panelists who agreed to join us for what I believe could be a historic discussion on policing in Monroe County, and I thank you all for joining us. Congresswoman Susan Wild, good evening. Ms. Jalila Parker, Executive Director of the Governor's Advisory Commission on African American Affairs, good evening. I believe we're still trying to get Senator Scavello on, but I do want to thank him for joining us this evening, or agreeing to join us. Representative Maureen Madden, good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Representative Rosemary Brown. Thank you for joining us. Strasburg Mayor Tara Probst, thank you for joining us. Stroudsburg Borough Council Member Erica McCabe, thank you for joining us. Chief Jennifer Lyon of SARPD, thank you for joining us. Sergeant James Wilgus, President of Stroud Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge 75, thank you for joining us. Chief Christopher Wagner of Pocono Mountain Regional Police Department, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Mr. Kasim Johnson, founder of the George Floyd Memorial March. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, and it is Dr. Christopher T. Brooks. Professor Christopher Brooks received his BA and MA in U.S. History from East Stroudsburg University of Pennsylvania. He then received a Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship to Edinburgh University, Scotland, where he studied British influences on the US judiciary. Dr. Brooks then went on to complete his doctoral work at Kassel University in Germany under Professor Dr. Horst Dippel. Please note, only 2 people ever succeeded in completing their dissertation under Dippel, and Dr. Brooks is one of them. He worked with Professor Dr. Dippel on his Modern Constitutionalism project, which had Dr. Brooks editing and translating constitutions from German to English. His doctoral work explored the suability of United States, or of the United States. While in Germany, Professor Brooks was an active member of the Center for North American Research, where he focused on constitutional and legal history, especially as it pertained to jurisprudential matters. He also worked for a number of mid to large size law firms teaching and doing translation work. Dr. Brooks is currently professor of history at East Strasburg University, where he teaches transatlantic, legal, constitutional, US, and African American history. He also serves as the university-wide pre-law advisor among several other committees and clubs. Dr. Brooks writes a monthly column for the Morning Call, Historically Speaking. Beyond publishing their several academic articles, his dissertation, and co-authoring 2 law books, his current research deals with revisiting the life and times of John S. Rock, the first African-American attorney admitted to argue before the US Supreme Court. That work has attracted the interest of a major university. Can't see that, I apologize. As well as the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia and the Institute for Justice in Washington, D.C. Please, everyone, I am honored. It is truly an honor to have Dr. Brooks with us this evening. And sir, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you, panelists, for participating in this timely discussion. I'm going to keep my remarks extremely brief. For time purposes, I figured, we lost a little bit because of technical issues, so let's just kind of cut to the chase.
Dr. Brooks, if I may jump in just a second, I do apologize. I did want to start the event and I don't want to skip over him because of time. I got a little off track, but I certainly don't want to start this event without acknowledging Mr. Kasim Johnson, founder of the George Floyd Memorial March, along with his brother, Dimitri.
Yeah, of course.
Good evening, Kasim. How are you?
Hello. How you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. I wanted to invite you to be a part of this panel because I felt as though the work that you and Dimitri did together and having, I'm hearing an echo, so forgive me, and having such an inspiring march, bringing thousands of young people of all colors and ages and older people as well out into the street to protest the death of George Floyd. Amazing for Monroe County. And you should be commended publicly for that. So I wanted to, appreciate you and commend you at this time for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
No problem. So tell me briefly, what inspired you to do the march? What made you decide that you were going to be the one to stand up?
I mean, I guess it just goes back to, since I first came to Pennsylvania. I moved out here since I was in, I believe, first grade. So I pretty much lived in East Stroudsburg or, Bushkill my whole life. But, I went to North High School. Growing up there, I didn't really, my parents always told me about, there's racism in this world, you're not always gonna be treated fairly. And I never got to see much of that growing up, because it was like a melting pot in North High School. So, some of my best friends were white and I had close friends who was black as well. So, I never really got to experience that until, I started, I guess, growing up out of, now, I wasn't in that cute little kid stage anymore. As I started becoming older, becoming a man, I started realizing, I will walk into stores and people are looking at me funny, like I'm about to, do something, or I'm going to steal something, or I'm going to cause trouble. Or there's times, I've walked past a person and they'll cross and go to the other side of the street or grab tighter into their purse to lock a door or something like that. And then it wasn't until I started seeing, deaths that happen more consistently. And so it made me start feeling I can't ignore it anymore because, this is my life, And eventually at some point in my life, I'm going to have kids, and I don't want to bring kids into this world that I didn't try to help change. So, and then after seeing that video, I've seen all like the videos, Eric Garner, stuff like this. And like, they've always made me mad or upset, but, never to the point like this video did for me. When after I seen this video and I seen like, the police officer's hands in his pockets with his knee on George Floyd's neck, just how what's the word I'm looking for? He just looked like, it was nothing to take that man's life. And that, after that, it broke me down. Like it was the first time seeing like one of these videos that actually brought tears to my eyes. And then I was speaking to one of my friends who actually helped me put the protest together as well, Nick Bishop. And he was telling about because he has a roommate who's white. And he was like, yeah, my roommate just last night asked me like, if I wanted to go jogging or something like that. And he was like, honestly, like, I don't feel comfortable going out at night and jogging. And I think that really touched me too, because it's like, I have Black friends too, and I don't want it to be one day, I wake up and I get a call or something like that it's happened to one of them. So, and I see people my age all the time. They're on, Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, and they'll post this about police brutality or race and stuff like that. But, just posting on social media isn't enough. So I didn't want to be a person that, that is just outraged on social media, because that doesn't do anything. Like, that falls on deaf ears. So I decided, I was never planned on being like the face of anything like this, but it needed to be done. And if no one was going to take the initiative to do it, then I would be the one to do it and, just roll with it.
And that's what I think is so amazing about what you did, Kasim, is because I feel like it set an example, honestly, for all citizens, right, across the United States, because you don't really have to have a degree in political science or, anything related to law or politics to just say, I want to do something, I want to do something positive, and I want to do something that's going to make a difference, not just for myself, but people in my community. And I thought that you definitely deserve the spotlight, and I'm so glad that you're able to be here tonight. So my next question before we move on and turn it back over to the moderator, what would you like to see happen as a result of not just tonight, but what would you like to see going forward in terms of the community? I mean, we have a great community, that's a given. Everyone here is very peaceful. We all live together in harmony, and that's fantastic. We enjoy police departments that, are great and responsible and supportive. So we're blessed in that regard. But, there are always going to be events from time to time that we're not happy with. So just in general, like, what would you like to see happen as a result of not just tonight, but going forward?
Well, specifically, I want to see, just more unity just in general, just like love your neighbor. Like, it's not a thing of just being black and white. Like, you should just be wanting to help out the next person. For example, for this community, I wanted to see like, more things for kids to be involved in after school. So, when they get older, their first thing is not to, let me start doing drugs. Let me go to the streets or something like that. I want to have, a community here. I can't affect, in Minneapolis or somewhere else like that where I land. I can't do nothing for like that place there, but I can help here. And when we get things right here, it's going to branch off to the next county, to the next county, to the next state. So I think going further, I just want to see people being more involved, helping people out. If you see your friend, something out and your friend is about to get in some trouble that's going to involve him, getting detained by cops, whatever the case maybe, that's going to lead to that, step in, say something to him, stop him from doing that. Understand, like, we need to come together if we want to get anything done, because when we're separated, it's just a bunch of chaos. It falls on deaf ears and we get nothing done that way. But when we're united, we can make a change and make a difference.
Thank you, Kasim. And one last question before we go. You have all of these people here who definitely are in positions to make the changes that you're looking for. Is there any message that you have for them tonight?
Honestly, well, I just want them, all you guys here, just to care, like, as much as we do. Because honestly, like, the way, like as a young Black man, I feel like when I see cops and stuff like that, I'm scared, I'm terrified. And like, there's times when I'm in a car with my friend who may be white or something like that, and it's nothing to him. Like, it's just like he'll see a cop and it's just regular activity. But me, like, my heart literally drops to my stomach. Or even if I get pulled over, like, I'm not worried about like getting like a speeding ticket or something like that. Like, I'm afraid that I'm lose my life. So I just want everyone that's here to care and understand, like, we are scared, we are terrified, and we want you guys to help us out because we need your help.
Thank you very much, Kasim. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool.
With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Brooks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for your words, Kasim. So I think we all know why we're here. There's no sense in me pontificating. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. I'm going to talk about the structure of how we're going to do this. I'm going to first begin with the federal level of addressing the issue of police reform, and then move on to state and then local. So we're going to begin with a few questions for Congresswoman Wild. And the first question that we have for Congresswoman Wild is, can you explain what qualified immunity is, how it relates to law enforcement, and why changing current law around it may be called for?
Thank you, Dr. Brooks. Thank you, Madam President. I don't see you now on the screen, but I know you're there for convening this important meeting, and to everybody else who is a participant. It's such an important issue, and I'm so glad that we're doing this. Hello, Monroe County. So in answer to your question, Dr. Brooks, qualified immunity is nothing more than a legal principle that has essentially been invented by courts, and creates a level of protection for government officials in the context of civil rights actions. Let me be perfectly clear. It does not apply to criminal actions. It applies to civil actions for monetary damages brought under the Civil Rights Act. So what it does is it provides certain protections for government officials, in this case, let's say police officers and police departments, and it bars a plaintiff, meaning the person bringing the suit, from recovering unless they can show that the officer has violated clearly established law. So it sounds kind of simple, but it's not. In effect, what it means is that the plaintiffs in in an excessive force case against a police officer can and will have their claims thrown out unless a prior appellate court has already held that that same type of conduct in the same circumstance violates the Constitution. So as we know, every case is fact specific. Every case is somewhat unique, slightly different. So it's very difficult to show that the actions violate some previously established legal principle. Let's talk about the George Floyd case for just a moment. If in order to defeat qualified immunity, the party bringing the suit, which presumably will be members of Mr. Floyd's family, would have to show that the police officer violated a prior legal principle that was established by court decision, that it was unlawful for an officer to apply his knee and his bodily force to someone's neck and throat in the course of an arrest. So you can imagine that it's very, very difficult to do that because of the fact that facts and circumstances are so different. So what happens as a result of qualified immunity is that many cases are dismissed by the court long before they ever reach the jury trial stage. So that if you bring a lawsuit and the officer or the police department or the municipality raises qualified immunity as a defense in a summary judgment motion, the court, meaning the judge, will have the opportunity to rule on that as a matter of law without the facts ever getting to the jury level. And so I will tell you that qualified immunity has been criticized across the political spectrum, from very, very conservative organizations to very, very liberal organizations. The ACLU and the NAACP are just two organizations that have criticized it, but also the Cato Institute and the Cook Foundation have both criticized it also. And so it's believed that qualified immunity allows an instance of egregious misconduct to go unpunished. And again, we're talking about civil suits. We're not talking about criminal suits, even if the court finds that the officer's conduct violated the Constitution in that particular situation.
Thank you. I may come back to that issue, but there's two other questions at least I want to get to. So what are your thoughts on having independent investigators in cases concerning law enforcement? And how can we ensure that fair and just investigations and trials happen in every state?
So those are two entirely different questions. So I'll address the independent investigators first. I think it's really important as a matter of public trust that there are independent investigators, not just independent agencies within the district attorney's office or the police force investigating. The public needs to know that the officers who are charged with their safety and well-being are being judged by an objective standard, not by a subjective standard that fellow police officers might apply or that a district attorney might apply. Now, having said that, I'm not suggesting that just any individual qualifies to be an independent investigator. It may very well be that an independent investigator for, let's say, I'm going to take it outside of Monroe County, something that happens within the Los Angeles Police Department, an independent investigator from the state of Ohio who has police credentials may very well be a qualified independent investigator. The main thing about an independent investigator is that they need to understand police practices. They need to understand what is permissible and acceptable within the bounds of the law and within the bounds of acceptable police practice. But they also need to take a level of emotionality out of it. So it's important both that it not be just somebody from the community who is particularly aggrieved by something that happens. So an independent investigator looking into the George Floyd killing should not be a member of the Minneapolis community, in my opinion, but rather should be somebody from outside, removed from the community, who is able to look at it objectively, but also with an understanding of exactly what police officers face on a daily basis, as well as what reasonable practices are to arrest an individual. And then the second question was,
yes,
how do we ensure fair and just jury trials? Is that the question, Dr. Brooks?
Fair and just investigations and trials. So you've got the independent investigator piece, related but separate question. Yeah.
Yeah. So jury trials are, and I'm, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm a former litigator, spent 35 years, most of my career in a courtroom. Jury trials are, by their very nature, you get inconsistent results because, quite frankly, one jury of 12 may judge the facts much differently than the very next group of 12 people. So but it is the judicial system that we have been handed by the U.S. Constitution. So I think first and foremost, it's really important that all parties in any kind of litigation, criminal or civil, have good, adequate counsel, competent counsel. And that means that we have to afford the right to competent counsel to all parties. Normally, police officers fall under the jurisdiction of a municipality. The municipality generally carries liability insurance. That insurance company will generally assign insurance defense counsel that has been thoroughly vetted, is known to the insurance company. And as a result, the police officer will often and generally get very competent representation. It's equally important that the plaintiff receive proper representation. Now, in a civil case, you don't have an automatic right to an attorney You can't go, you won't get one at court expense. There are some provisions to get pro bono attorneys. And a lot of these cases are handled on a contingent fee basis, meaning you don't pay the attorney unless you prevail in the case. But having said that, it's really important to understand that not all lawyers are created equal. Not all lawyers have the same levels of expertise in different fields. And so I think that the most important thing is that you have a fair judge. And that probably is the most critical thing, because the judge is literally the gatekeeper of the evidence. The judge decides what the jury is going to hear by way of evidence. So selection of judges at the county level, at the state level, and at the federal level are extremely important. We're in a state where judges are elected. The judicial elections are often the subject of very little publicity. People generally don't quite know what they're voting for or who they're voting for, but they are really important elections, and that's a subject for another day. And then you need to have a level playing field in that courtroom. The lawyers need to be of equal competence and reputation to make sure that they are trying the case. And beyond that, the vagaries of the jury trial system is nothing that we can address legislatively. I do think the jury trial system works by and large. And unfortunately, there are certainly circumstances that require that a jury be brought in from a different venue. From if there's been a whole lot of publicity, if there were a case in East Stroudsburg that had all kinds of publicity, you wouldn't necessarily want the jury to be chosen from people in Stroudsburg or East Stroudsburg, because they may not be able to be impartial, and that's the main thing you want from a jury.
Thank you. Yeah, I have. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into some of the peripheral issues, in particular judicial elections and some of the alternatives.
Happy to have that discussion on another day.
Another time, I would love to do that. Can you share with us a little bit about the suggested reforms at the DOJ in how that would include broader powers for both investigation and prosecution?
So, the act that is now being considered by Congress, which is the Justice and Policing Act, and I hasten to add that the U.S. Senate is considering its own bill, and we will at some point have a process by which we merge the two bills, negotiate different terms and that kinds of thing. So it is under consideration as part of the act is that the DOJ that there be additional powers afforded to the DOJ, including subpoena power for the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to conduct pattern and practice investigations, so that individual police departments that seem to have a pattern and practice of excessive force cases, and we'll talk about something else in just a second that will help establish that, are able to be investigated by the DOJ. Some of that may sound a little bit ironic now in the face of the many criticisms that we have seen of the Department of Justice of late. So that obviously is a problem with it. But the bill would also provide grants to state attorneys general to conduct their own pattern and practice investigations. And I think it's really important that you be able to balance what the state can do at the attorney general level and what the federal Department of Justice can do. I wanted to just mention that one of the important aspects of the House bill is that it would create a national data bank, which would essentially be a means by which I'm going to say a rogue officer, and I do consider certain officers to be rogue because by and large our police are good people. They serve the community. They have very difficult jobs. So I don't by any means put all police officers in the category of rogue police officers. I was the city solicitor in Allentown, worked with the police department very closely. But if you have an officer that has been found to have violated somebody's civil rights, or simply by virtue of the internal investigation that may have been conducted by that police department and that which results in that officer being fired, that would be reported to a national data bank so that other municipalities around the country would be aware of that before they undertook to hire that individual. So before anybody starts being too upset about whether that's an infringement on an officer's rights or a violation of privacy and so forth, I want to point out that doctors have had this kind of data bank for decades now, decades, going back to the mid 80s when a national data bank was created so that, not so that you as a member of the public could investigate the data bank and see whether the doctor that you were going to go see about your sinus condition had been reported. You can't do that. But a hospital, Lehigh Valley Hospital, St. Luke's, any other hospital, if they're considering hiring a particular physician, will have access to the data bank results and will know whether that particular physician has had a certain number of successful malpractice claims. By the way, the fact that a doctor's been sued doesn't show up in the data bank. It's only adverse results, which include settlements. Okay, so lawyers have a similar type of data bank, which is accessible to the public. So all this is an extension of that kind of data bank. It's entirely reasonable, and I personally don't believe that it's something that should be accessible by members of the public. I think that's something where a number of us will probably have to agree to disagree. But I do believe it's very, very important because I do believe that police officers have a difficult job, and I don't know that we necessarily want people knowing the details of what they may or may not have done or what an IA investigation may have shown. But having said that, I think it's really important that we have information that allows other municipalities to know what that particular police officer's background and history is.
So just a follow up to that, and then, just a follow up to that. Do you think a part of the reason beyond sort of simple privacy issues and the idea of possibly creating a biased situation against the police officer, might another concern be potential vigilantism?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Might a concern also be potential vigilantism?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean that's why I don't believe that it's something that should be accessible publicly, but I do believe that it absolutely should be accessible before a police officer is able to be hired in a municipality. I think it would go a long way. It's very, very difficult. Having been a city solicitor, I will tell you, first of all, it's difficult to attract qualified police recruits these days. And so often the police force will be inclined to, simply base it on an interview and a simple background check. And I think that it would be valuable to have that information.
Thank you. I want to now address a few questions to Director Parker from the governor's office. The first question I have for you is whether or not you could talk about why Governor Wolf believed reform was necessary in law enforcement here in Pennsylvania, and what steps can he take to make sure some of the suggested reforms occur?
Sure. So I would say one thing. So let me just back up and kind of explain my role as the executive director of his advisory commission, African American Affairs. The governor has 5 affinity commissions: African American Affairs, Latino, Asian Pacific Islander, LGBTQ, and women. And all of us are charged with advising and advocating on behalf of our respective communities. So I have a commission of 20 volunteers from across the state, and that's what we do. We've been working with Governor Wolf and the administration. So I'm a a staffer of his office. I work directly in the governor's office, and we've been working since day one on some issues with criminal justice reform and law enforcement, and working with state police. I think we've been more, because of the unfortunate incidents that have been happening and some of the demonstrations, what you're seeing is us being more public about some things that were already in work. So we've been on kind of moving in the right direction. Things definitely have accelerated because of current events, and I think we are more vocal and more public about some of the things that we've been working on. But we've been working with the state troopers on recruitment, retention, hiring, promotion. We've been, like I said, working on some criminal justice reform, clean slate on the opposite side, opportunities for second chance for our returning citizens. I just think that now we're being more public about some of the sausage making and letting people know we're working on these issues, as opposed to kind of waiting till it's done and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we release that information. You're back on mute.
Sorry
But I'll
about
accept that question too.
Thank you. So, yeah, actually, I want to move on to this. If you would, could you explain the Civil Unrest Recovery Fund and how that would work and how it would be funded by the Commonwealth?
So that was a proposal. So the governor hasn't adopted that yet. That was a proposal. There was a working group out of Philadelphia. It was some state reps, Philadelphia City Council members, some attorneys, and private citizens that put together a police reform proposal that they released on June 2nd. The governor, and the way they broke it down was they had things that they needed to do as legislators, things that the governor could do, things that city council could do, and local mayors and municipalities could undertake as a comprehensive platform for police reform. So that is one of the suggestions and things that they're advocating for the governor and the governor's office to do. So we haven't adopted that yet, but what they're asking is for funds to be set aside for small business owners, mom and pop shops that were damaged during some of the rioting and looting, for them, especially if their insurance company would not cover some of the losses, that there will be a fund or a low interest loan coming from the Commonwealth for those businesses to rebuild. We know a lot of our economic centers are small and mom and pop businesses. So that was one of their requests. So we are exploring it, but we have not committed or put out a program for that as of yet.
Okay. So it's in the works, as it were.
It is being considered.
It's being considered. Okay.
Yeah. So right now there's funding for COVID funding that's targeted for small, diverse businesses. So that program is up and running, and those funds can be used.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but so the COVID funding we're talking about from Pennsylvania or federal?
This is federal CARES money that Pennsylvania has earmarked. So what the governor did was he took the federal CARES money that was allotted to Pennsylvania, and he earmarked $110 million along with the General Assembly. So the colleagues here from the General Assembly, that would go to small and diverse businesses.
Understood. Thank you. Okay. The governor wants to, would like a deputy inspector general to combat waste, fraud, and abuse in areas of law enforcement. Can you please explain, can you please explain more about this position and why it is deemed necessary?
Sure. So that was, again, one of the requests from the police reform proposal. What we see is a lot of times, as Congresswoman Wild alluded to, with some of our rogue officers, there's a pattern of behavior that with early detection and some checks and balances could be prevented, or people can be counseled out of certain professions. So the inspector general, and we have inspector generals, that is an entity already in existence, and they are tasked to look at waste, fraud on a number of issues. So we have inspector generals that look at welfare fraud, inspector generals that look at abuse for Commonwealth employees. So this would just be an additional position in the inspector general's office, but their task would just be to look at law enforcement entities. And I just want to also be clear that the governor only has jurisdiction over the Pennsylvania State Police, National Guard, law enforcement as attached to corrections, the state correctional system, and law enforcement with the state park rangers. So these, his proposals would only apply to those law enforcement agencies under his jurisdiction.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your responses. I would like to now turn our attention to some others, to our state legislators who are with us, Representative Madden and Brown. I don't know if Senator Scavello was able to log on or not. I hope he did.
We were trying. We're still trying. We would definitely want to get him on. I tried.
Okay. Well, if we have to come back to him at the end, that's perfectly fine with me.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to continue then. If Representatives Brown and Madden, I'll let you guys decide who wants to answer what question, or if you want to alternate. First question, though, is what is your position on requiring, well, you might both want to answer this one. What is your position on requiring law enforcement officers to be mandated to report police misconduct, corruption, or brutality? I mean, basically, this is the whole question of the blue wall of silence.
Where are you, Maureen?
I
can't see you.
I'm in between Tara and Sergeant.
All right, there you go. There you go. I'll move you. It's up to you. Go ahead. I'll let you go.
So let me just put it out there that I am the mother of 2 New York City police officers, very proud of them. They work very hard. I'm also a member of the Pennsylvania Legislative Black Caucus. The statistics of the population of African Americans, Black people who live in Pennsylvania is 11%. It happens to be 20% in Monroe County. So I felt it was important for me to represent those people who elected me and know their, their issues up close and be able to advocate on their behalf. So having said that, I believe the blue wall of silence is long due to be dismantled. Police officers have to report a crime, whether it's a civilian or another police officer. And anybody who doesn't speak up and is found out, as we're finding out with George Floyd and the other murders of Black men, is that they are now being charged. And particularly Attorney General Ellison, who said the most profound thing: we won't have justice until we stop undercharging police officers and overcharging Black men. So I sit right there. If you are within sight of a fellow police officer committing a crime against a Black man, anyone, you are an accessory to that crime. And there is no blue wall of silence. It's something that is so 20th century or 19th century. So.
Okay, all right. Representative Brown, did you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I'll be really quick. And we're probably on the same page with this, which I think is great. You know, my basis is always right is right and wrong is wrong. And when you look at something like this, it's not any different than our mandated sexual reporters. And when you see something that is not right, you see something that is inappropriate, you see something that is dangerous, there is absolutely no reason that anyone should not report, especially in an industry where the law enforcement is protecting our society. So you look at that and you say, how could there even be a consideration? Now, I think the problem probably lies more in the culture of the police departments and, you know, sort of backing each other and being afraid or whatever the case may be. That is something that will really have to be worked on. Because when you look at the fact of saying we can make the law, it's definitely needed, it's definitely important, but how realistically can you get that to be every day and be something that our officers are strong with, and that they're not worried about being fired from their job, they're not worried about other implications. But again, I think you go right back to right is right and wrong is wrong. And when you see something, you say something.
Dr. Brooks, if I could just jump in really quick, I apologize, but
Yeah,
I was just
go ahead.
tired. I'm looking at the officers here, and I don't want to talk over them with respect to this question. I would like to get feedback from them now, if it's okay.
That's
So
fine.
we can start with whomever you'd like, Dr. Brooks, but I just wanted to get the officers who are here and who put their lives on the line every day. I wanted their thoughts on that.
Okay, that is fine with me. Okay, well, let's change this. See what I'm doing. Chief Wagner, if you would, what are your thoughts on this matter?
I guess the easiest thing I can do is kind of address the blue wall of silence. It's kind of taken on a life of its own and kind of its own mystique. And I certainly preface it with, I can only relate to what I've seen in my career within Monroe County. And I think a lot of the participants here today, we're kind of all on the same page that we have very good community relations with our law enforcement officers. But I can truly tell you that the law enforcement officers that I work with and that I represent do not protect bad officers. Derek Chauvin is a disgrace to the entire industry. It enrages us as well. Officers like that have no place within law enforcement. And really, I don't see any law enforcement officers that protect that type of behavior. I can't comment to the culture of inner city police agencies or, what happens there. I don't have any experience with that. But what I can assure you with my law enforcement experience is that blue wall of silence, I really don't see it. As a matter of fact, over my career, I've had several supervisors come to me with behavior that they've witnessed that they were uncomfortable with. And it took a lot of courage for them to come forward, but they did the right thing. And that's kind of the culture that I've experienced. And so I just kind of put it out there that, that blue wall of silence sometimes, kind of takes on a life of its own. But I really just don't see a whole lot of that the way I think a lot of people envision.
Chief Lyon, thank you, Chief Wagner. Chief Lyon, what are your thoughts on this? Do you see things pretty much the same way as Chief Wagner?
Yeah, I think Chief Wagner pretty much said most of it. I've been fortunate in my career too, and in my department here where we don't have a blue wall of silence. There's people stand up like Representative Brown said, right is right. And we have good people here that do that and have done that. We've had supervisors, we've had patrol officers bring things up to the front to say, I saw this and I have a concern. And it's immediately been addressed by our department. But that also comes along with so many other things that the NAACP, the Legislative Black Caucus, everybody is looking at to reform with police, which comes with good hiring practices and really thorough background checks and knowing the kind of person you're hiring. You have to hire good people to have good officers.
Yes, excellent point. Sergeant Wilgust, did you want to add anything?
Certainly. And dovetailing on what the two chiefs had said, here in Monroe County and locally, we've been very fortunate. We have very professional police officers. We have good agencies. But that comes back to the hiring practices of those agencies, the amount of training that the officers go through, the education, the background, and the diversity that we're exposed to, I think tells you a lot about what kind of departments, what kind of officers you have. There's not a blue line of silence here, I think, because we work so hard at being professional and getting other officers to reach a higher bar. We hold them more accountable and we expect the best from them. And when that falls short, there are methods in place to deal with that. up to and including dismissal. And officers have been dismissed, from the departments because they don't meet those standards.
Great. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, I'm sorry, just a quick follow-up. Just out of curiosity, how difficult would it be for you all as chiefs and sergeant to remove an officer that you found to be problematic, or maybe over time became problematic? How difficult would it be for you all to have that person removed?
I guess I'll go first. It really depends. I mean, I've, and I have to be careful what I say because of labor law, of course, but I have terminated officers on the first offense because I've found the conduct egregious. Other officers where it's minor offenses, maybe they're not the most polite person. That can be corrected most times with a good talking to. I guess really what I would need to terminate an officer if I was moving in that direction is the support of my elected officials that sit on my police commission. I certainly bring all discipline to them. I advise them of what the circumstances are, what the findings of the investigation are, and what my decision is as far as discipline. And I look for their guidance and their thoughts and concerns, and then I move forward. I've been very fortunate that I do have a good working relationship with my police commission, and they've supported my disciplinary decisions. So it's not difficult, but at the same time, you need to be fair and just, and you need to be thorough.
Did you have any other follow-up you wanted? You're muted.
No, Dr. Brooks, thank you.
Okay. All right. And this would be addressed to the legislators. Do you believe we should prohibit language that allows interfering with police misconduct investigations, disciplinary action, and discipline records from being included in police collective bargaining agreements?
Can you repeat that question?
Absolutely. Do you believe we should prohibit language that allows interference with police misconduct investigations and disciplinary action and disciplinary records from being included in CBAs, police CBAs?
Yeah, I actually, on this again, it really goes back to why wouldn't you be able to have that information in, to review and to have in bargaining agreements? I mean, it just makes sense. It just is something that the more information you have, the better. And if you want to try to improve and build and bring the best to the force, I think that's really important. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to that. I know that's going to be a little more detailed when you look at the bargaining agreements, but I think that that's absolutely fine.
Okay, excuse me. Representative Madden, did you have any add on that?
Sure. So when I'm looking at these three bills that you all mentioned in your itinerary, House Bill 1841 in particular stands out. Had there been full disclosure of hiring practices, had there been communication, it quite simply would have saved the lives of Tamir Rice at the hands of Timothy Lohman. Timothy Lohman had been fired from another police department in Ohio and went to another police department in Ohio, and there was no background check. So when that young man, 12 years old, was standing in front of a children's center, pointing a water pistol, somebody should have known that that officer already had a trigger finger, for lack of a better word. It certainly would have saved Eric Garner's life. Daniel Pantaleo had 3 lawsuits settled, crimes of excessive force, and then he stayed on the job for 5 years after that and continued to get paid. That's not right. If you have to settle a lawsuit just once, it's time for you to lose your job. And we have to be able to share. There has to be full disclosure. And when you go to a bargaining table, you have to know who are your strong police officers, who are your honest police officers. And we can't let these bad actors and this bad behavior continue, and we can't cover it up in the brass. We're only as good as our brass. I can speak mostly to the New York City Police Department, as my oldest son has been on for 15 years, my younger son 10 years. And I can tell you that what they talk about where there's no quotas, there are quotas. As a rookie, my son got thrown into a van with a bunch of other officers, opened up the back of the van on the streets of the South Bronx, and his sergeant said, "Go get me some citations." And that sergeant witnessed my son watch a little boy get out on the bus in the middle of the bus and not pay the fare, and he got an extra 6 months probation for that. And I said to him, "Well, Alex, why didn't you give that young man a ticket?" He said, "Mom, I'm in the South Bronx. That boy is 10 years old. How do I know he has the fare to get on that bus? Why is my son getting extensive probation? Because the brass are padding the numbers. They make an arrest, whether or not the district attorney takes that arrest and moves forward with it, it doesn't matter. Those statistics still apply, and they show good work. And it's not good work. It's just mass, citations and just rounding people up. And there is no justice in that. You're utilizing time that could be extended to could be extended to good community policing. So I hesitate to use this word trickle down, but it really does start at the top and trickles down to the officers. And it has to start with the chiefs, and it has to start with the captains, and there has to be strong civilian complaint review boards. Chief Wagner, Chief Lyons, and I, there's never a time that I don't call them that they don't pick up the phone. We have such good relationships, and the police commissioner in the Pocono Commission is great. Civilian Complaint Review Board, I have a friend who is a judge who was the executive director. They investigate civilian complaints, and then they turn that information over to the police department for them to apply a penalty. And I'm sorry, the vast majority of the time, those officers never see any repercussions from those investigations. And that is from the executive director of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, who is in fact my friend. So, I mean, this 1841 is a really important bill for me. They're all important. The PTSD, there's no way you could have gone through what just happened over the death of George Floyd, be a police officer, and not be suffering from some PTSD. I know of police officers who walked from Brooklyn to Manhattan and back again and worked a 25-hour shift. Where's their counseling? Where's their coping skills? So 1910 is a really important bill. And then, Senator Scavella, in case he can't get on, wanted me to tell you that he supports all of these bills. And most importantly, he supports Senator Street's bill that would ban chokeholds. That you need legislation for that? If you don't know that you shouldn't choke someone as a police officer, perhaps that's not your vocation. Is what I can say. And I am a co-sponsor on the two House bills, and they are up for second consideration on Monday. So hopefully we leave this legislative session with these bills voted on and sent to the House, and then the Senate bill sent back to us for concurrence. Thank you for allowing me the time to expand on that.
Thank you for expanding, but I want to give Sergeant Wilgus, Chief Lyon, or Chief Wagner a chance to chime in there if they wish on the issues that were just raised.
Either chief want to go, or
Sergeant, if you want to, please.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Again, I can only speak locally. I know Representative Madden had spoke about her experience with her sons in New York and what they went through their training and how it was they were exposed to quotas and stuff. That's not how we operate here locally. And it's a shame that that does happen in other places around the country. So I'm cautionary about comparing local reality to national reality. There's differences in state laws, differences in police training across the nation, differences in hiring practices, and all that make a difference in the outcomes. And here in PA is not what it is in Minnesota, it's not what it is in Georgia, not what it is in California. And we're fortunate for that. Pennsylvania has a lot of strong laws that protect people's rights, that protect officers' rights also. But importantly, our requirements are stringent. Pennsylvania is one of the leaders in the country, and we're fortunate to have that. And I like to believe that our county and our local municipalities are leaders in the state. And I think I speak for the chiefs in saying that we have some of the best departments here in Monroe County.
Thank you for that comment. That's for sure. The next question I have, excuse me, for the state, as far as state issues, do you support improving access to police video footage by requiring all non-body camera police video to be subject to right to know laws? Representative Brown.
Okay, thank you. I know it's hard. I don't even see Maureen up there in my picture. So
I'm right next to you.
yeah, it's not coming up on mine. It's funny. Welcome to the world of Zoom, right? There we go. So no, absolutely. I do think that a lot of the forces now do have body cameras. There are some, I think, financial issues on some of them getting them. But I do believe the body cameras are good for all sides of everything. So you have, again, once, like I said before, the more information you have, the better. And that's what we really want. We go back to what Kasim was saying earlier. You want people to do the right thing. You just want people to be good people. And that's a video snapshot of exactly what happened. These videos are difficult to watch. I mean, I really have a hard time watching them when, you know, the most recent video with George Floyd, but it is good information for the truth and the truth on both sides. And for the right to know piece, I think going back to almost Congressman Wild, I do think that the right to know is important, but you have to be very careful. Things can really be abused in our world right now. I think social media can be very devastating, detrimental. It can really hurt for a fair trial. It could hurt for a lot of different things. So you have to be really careful with the right to know aspect of it. But I am for as much transparency as we can give without affecting the other rights and without affecting the process for people to, you know, go through their trial system, whatever it may be. But I will add to that, I think, you know, as we go through this next week of legislation, the two pieces that Marie mentioned, 1841, which is the, you know, putting out your previous records and having to maintain the records of your previous employment, you know, the PTSD training and all of that included in 1910. There's a piece of House Bill 1910 that I wanted to make sure you knew that I think is really important with training. And that is there's interacting with individuals of diverse racial, ethnic, and economic backgrounds, training enhanced, the use of force, including deadly force, de-escalation and harm techniques, and also community and cultural awareness and implicit bias, which I think is really important, which when we say that, you say some of the bias we may not all of us even know that we even have. And that's really important to bring awareness and to try to help people understand their most inner thoughts, procedural justice and reconciliation techniques. So as we talk about incidents happening, I think you can see a lot of similarities on this phone call, I think, on support for doing the right thing and trying to get the most high level of officers out there, get rid of the bad eggs, and really try to help police our society correctly. And so these two bills, I think, are things that we can do quickly and that hopefully will help. And I think the body cam thing is probably right behind it in some fashion. But again, some of those details have to really be looked at so that they're done right, because you don't want to do something incorrectly and cause what we call in the legislative world unintended consequences. And you actually do more harm than you do good. And you have to be really careful. So a little extra I went on top of the body cams, but I think the whole piece of what's coming together, this is Democrat and Republican. This is good stuff. This is stuff that we can say This is not a Democrat-Republican issue. This is an issue that's important to how we treat people, and it's important to our society. Let's get it together. Let's get the politics out of it, and let's do it right and what we can to really be productive.
Thank you. One final question. Following the death of George Floyd, what concerns you as a legislator, and how will you use your position to unite the community? I guess we can go back to Representative Madden on that matter.
Well,
I think you've kind of touched upon a lot of that already.
yeah, I tend to answer questions in paragraphs. I apologize. So let me use Kasim as an example, as a stellar example. We knew nothing about, we were just fresh from the NAACP vigil. And then the next day there, or while we were talking about that, there was a flyer appearing on Facebook. No organization attached to it. So we searched it out. We got Kasim, we got his phone number. I called him and I said, how can I help? What can I do? Can I show up? Can I speak? Should I ask Congressman Cartwright? Congresswoman Wild tried to get there, got stuck in traffic. And so I reached out to Kasim, and I brought my friend Rocky Sales, who I've been trying to get justice for since I've been in office, so we could showcase, all the issues. And that, I think, is my biggest role, is to get involved when somebody as involved or takes a leadership role like Kasim. The best thing I can do is get out of his way and just follow his lead and then back it up with legislation. And as I said, I've co-sponsored every one of these bills. I will vote for every single one of these bills. If you are a good police officer, you have nothing to fear from a body camera, and you have nothing to fear from right to know laws, just like good legislators have nothing to fear from right to know laws. So I'm so in favor of full transparency and background checks and making sure that only the best officers are on the street, and that small minority of officers who don't belong there get weeded out and aren't there. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I would like to be, in the interest of time, because we have a few questions that have been posed by our viewers. I want to kind of quickly move on to the next bit, which is looking at some of our local issues with Mayor Probst, Council Member McCabe, and Chiefs Lyons and Wagner, as well as Sergeant Wilgus. The first question, this would probably be directed more to our friends from Strasburg. Do you support the creation of an independent, well-financed, civilian-led and managed review board with subpoena and disciplinary powers to recommend internal affairs and criminal investigations per the negotiated disciplinary code?
Tara, did you want to start?
I mean, yeah, if you want, we can go back and forth, but well, first let me say that there's a couple things. What we're talking about here is real. In my last year of law school, I did a paper called Same Crime, Different Time. It talked about, not only the different amounts of times when the just say no and the federal judges were leaving the bench because they had no say, but also the incarceration rate of young Black males versus white males. This has been going on basically since the beginning of time, and it really hasn't stopped. Now, I listened to what Kasim said. I am a white female, and if a cop pulls me over, of course you get nervous, I'm going to get a ticket. But what you said, Kasim, is what people who are not a minority don't realize. And to feel the way you feel over being pulled over, nobody should ever have to feel that way, ever. The difference of getting a ticket or getting shot is unacceptable. So let me say that I am behind the cause, and I'm behind anything that makes everybody treated equally in the eyes of the law. With that being said, I'm also on the Strasburg Police Commission. and I work directly with SARP, and they are, when I say a force to be reckoned with, we have fantastic officers. I don't hear anything about discrimination with our officers. And it doesn't mean that maybe before I got there, I've been on it for 5 years. We are out in the community. We do events. We're very community oriented. We try to do as much as we can in the community, especially prior to COVID, whether it's showing up at, Dansbury Park for the fireworks, giving out the bracelets. We really do have a great force like that. But we're lucky. So if you take a look of outside Stroud Area Regional Police Department, and these different officers are dealing with the things that they're going with. Excuse me 1 second, you guys. Sorry about that. My kid was getting a little loud. But anyway, when you're outside of Stroud Area Regional and you see what's going on nationally, you have people in Germany and London for Black Lives Matter breaking lockdown. That's how this is so important. So I can only say for my police department that I represent, which is Stroud Regional, that they're excellent. And I definitely have a top rating for them. However, I do think there should be everything that the legislators are putting forth. I think it needs to happen. I think we're all going to feel safer. To be a police officer, military, you're trained with guns, you're all these different aspects. Sometimes some of these police departments, they don't even, to me, have enough training. They shouldn't even be carrying a weapon, to be honest with you. So I do feel that there should be transparency, a right to know. There's a right to know on me. There's a right to know on Maureen Madden and Erica McCabe. There certainly should be a right to know on the police force. So I agree with that 100%. And I hope that answers your question, because locally, our police officers walked arm in arm with the protesters, and I'm so proud of them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any areas within law enforcement locally that could use improvement, in your opinion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I can jump in. Absolutely. Nothing is ever perfect, and when it comes to the experiences of our young people of minority in Monroe County and Strasburg, they have very different experiences than most of us do. I'm a housewife, so my experience with police officers are very different than, say, Kasim's experiences. And that's not saying that our officers are bad or that they are not held to task, but we can always learn from our own experiences and from the experiences of others. So what I'm saying is we can all improve, and I think that having that civilian panel would be only beneficial to not only our community but our officers as well.
Yeah, Tara, I wanted to follow up with you about that, your opinion on the Civilian Review Board, because a lot of people in the community are asking, what your opinion is on that. And if so, like, what type of funding would you need? Where would that come from? That kind of thing.
Well, if we get into funding, that's a whole different thing because, it does cost money to run a police department, and it's the biggest portion of the Strasburg borough. However, we also need the safety, which they provide. So I would definitely be open to a civilian task force, but even on the police commission, it's a volunteer. I do think that there are citizens out there that would want to do it just like they volunteer for the Shade Tree Commission. We have a human relations committee in Strasburg Borough that racism is not accepted in the borough, and we give you a path to the Court of Common Pleas. We're the only one in Monroe County that does that. And it's all volunteers. So I really feel that right now for municipalities, it's stressful. And there's a lot going on in Strasburg with properties being taken. Interstate 80 is going to crush us. So I would welcome it. And I think you'll see people who'd want to volunteer to be on this. But just like we want a right to know on the police, we need a right to know and a background check on the civilians, because that's only fair. You want to make sure there's not a disgruntled person against the cops, and you want to make sure that there's not a disgruntled person against, someone not the same color as them. So I really think that if we got a review board, I think you'd see volunteers that would come forth. That's my opinion on it. I mean, we're a really volunteer town, and I don't think that we would have a problem getting people. Do you, Erica, to stand up for something like that?
Absolutely not. We do have a very community-minded area that are willing to volunteer their time, but to touch on the issue of having subpoena rights over the local police union, they should absolutely, because if you're going to oversee something, you should have full transparency with the department and with the officials that you're working with.
So,
I just want to quickly, because we're getting close to the Q&A for the audience. So I wanted to, before I turn it back over to Dr. Brooks, I wanted to ask you all, tell us more about the commission. Who makes up this commission, and what is the purpose of the commission?
So for the Stroud Area Regional Police Department, there's 3 municipalities. There's East Strasburg Borough, Strasburg Borough, and Stroud Township. So Stroud Township, the representative is the township manager, who was also an old supervisor who's been on since the beginning, I believe, right, Jen? Daryl's been on there since the beginning. And then they have 2 residents from Stroud Township. For East Strasburg, there's a mayor, the borough manager, and a council member. For Strasburg, it's the mayor, the executive to the borough manager, and also Joanne Kachansky, who was a councilwoman for 20 years and has been on the police commission since it started. She's now a resident of Strasburg. So that's your commission, and we meet monthly. It's well run, and yeah, there's challenges and there's issues that go on, but I'm here to tell you that the disciplinary action, or these cops are racist or anything, I feel fortunate they don't come our way. And Erica is shaking her head. Yes, we're fortunate. We know that does not exist in other places. And if it does exist, I know that I would be getting phone calls as mayor, because I get phone calls all the time over these things. And that's a good thing. And I hope it continues that way. I'm really proud of our force, but I know everyone can work to be better. Everybody. And everyone, for 1 second, if you are not a person of color, you have no idea what it feels like to be pulled over by a cop or have that insecurity, and don't pretend you do. So, yes, all lives matter, but Black lives matter, and this needs to stop. And that is the most important thing.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Okay. This question is really for, could be for, I'm going to give it to Chief Wagner. There was a call to establish public comment hearings pre-negotiation prior to the ratification of a new police contract. One area of concern in the community is the allowance of a significant period before an officer is required to give a statement outlining his or her version of events following the death of a civilian. What does the language look like here concerning that, and why is this allowed when suspects are required to give one immediately? So suspects are required to give a statement immediately. Why is there's lag time, as it were, for the police? That's basically where the question's going.
Well, I think first of all, we need to stress that a suspect is not required to give a statement. They have the Fifth Amendment protections to avoid self-incrimination, and they do not need to speak with any investigator. Police officers know that as well, and they have those same protections. They do not need to speak at all. Now, generally what we do is, in my experience, we've always had the cooperation of officers. They've always given a statement. But what we've found from past investigations is with cognizant recognition and recollection is that 3 days later, they will remember some of the smaller details, and we will get a clearer picture of that. In our investigation, certainly we always want to get an initial statement from whether it's a civilian or an officer. So the way we conduct an investigation let's say an officer involved shooting, is we get what's called a public safety statement immediately, which is basically give me the snapshot of what happened so that we can launch our investigation. Then what we do is we do that in-depth interview 72 hours later, where we're expecting that cognitive recollection has recovered and they're starting to remember the finer details of that event. So we do interview them initially. We do a follow-up interview within, after 72 hours. We would usually do that same thing with a civilian, where we would ask them to give an initial statement. A lot of times they do say, I'm not comfortable. I don't want to do it right now. And then they may get counsel and come speak with us days later. So the process sort of works similarly, but that is really how that process works.
Okay. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead to the next question, considering the time. This question would be for, I'm going to direct this to Chief Lyon. How can the community and law enforcement work together to ensure justice is truly for all, in your opinion?
I mean, I'd like to think that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was about to say, we're doing a lot of that now, but where do you see room for improvement on that?
And it's hard, like Chief Wagner and Sergeant Wilgus have said, is my experience is limited to this town and our local police department. So I can't speak for things that go on, like Maureen talks about, in NYPD or these large departments.
Right.
We always try to maintain transparency. We try to be as transparent with the community as we can. It's community policing programs, it's education, it's so people understand our point of view and we can see the public's point of view as well. I mean, we have to trust in the community and the community has to trust in us. So I think it's coming to the table on things like these, not refusing to talk to people, not refusing to have the hard conversations. I mean, we can always improve. We can always do better. We can always strive to be better as things change in our community and in the world. And I think that's what all of us are doing here today is we're looking at House Bill 1841, House Bill 1910, 637, and having conversations with my sergeant today. We're all in agreement. These are things we've all said for years need to improve. It takes us a long time to do a thorough background check. And we have multiple times in the past refused to hire officers that we could not confirm stuff, or it was suspicious reasons as to why they left another department. And we did not hire them. Sometimes that's a hard process for us, though, just to get them off of our list and, and remove them from it so that we don't have to hire them and don't have to keep looking at them because we know there's a problem there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's all these things coming together and all of us talking is what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. We have, just before I say another word, okay, there are 9 questions. I want to, Chris, if you could chime in.
Read it through them.
Get that rolling considering the time.
Yeah. Well, I did have one more question from the list before we went to the audience Q&A. Well, please. Two. Can either or all of you, because it might be different based, on in each area or each department, describe the steps a civilian should take to file a formal complaint against an officer? We can start with Chief Lyon and then go to Chief Wagner.
So for our department, in order to file a formal complaint, they need to come into headquarters and they need to say they want to file a complaint. And we have forms here and they get them and they fill them out. The sergeant on staff will initially take a quick look at it to see. A lot of times a complaint may be a rudeness or a not understanding policy complaint where there's not an actual complaint. So if the sergeant talks to the person and it's really not a complaint, then it doesn't go any further. He logs that, what was done. And then anything else that would come in that wouldn't be resolved there would come directly to me. I would take that and assign it to one of our IA investigators and it would go from there. I've also had people email me directly and I would get the paperwork to them and they can do it that way. Some people are fearful to come into the department to do that. So we will handle it that way also.
And so can you walk us briefly through the process? Because I think a lot of people just kind of want to know. So what happens after that? So does the decision rest just with you, Chief? Or does it depend upon what the complaint looks like? Like, does the person who makes the complaint, do you get back to them to let them know what the result was of the investigation? Like, walk us through a little bit of, let's just say, for instance, there was an accusation of profiling or maybe something more tangible. So, there was an accusation of some serious charges that may have been proven, right? What steps are taken after you receive the complaint and after you consulted with their superior?
So we would do a thorough investigation. I mean, I really look at my police commission as a type of civilian review board. They are made aware when any complaint comes in. Our legal counsel is involved with that, and they know the steps that are being taken, where the investigation leads to, my recommendations at the end, but they are the ones that have the discipline power and decide the discipline. So I'm not the only one sitting here being the head Gestapo here and saying, this is what it is and this is what we're doing. No, it's reviewed by everybody. So it's not just me. So like I said, I really kind of look at them almost as like a civilian review board. We've also used that to go outside of our department with a couple issues we've had where an outside investigator was actually brought in to investigate the matter, and we went off of their recommendations. So I think that's a little bit what we're talking about with civilian review board. So I know it's not exactly, but I really look at it in that way because we have those checks and balances where it's not just one person and everybody's checking everybody else. The person, Krista, would be advised of the outcome of the internal affairs investigation, but that is a very generalized thing as far as it was investigated and it was founded. It doesn't lead into divulging the discipline. It would say the officer was disciplined. It would not give the civilian what exactly happened or the outcome was for it.
Okay, thank you, Chief Lyon. Chief Wagner, is your process fairly similar?
Yeah, we're very similar. I don't see a whole lot of differences between us and Stroud. We have a complaint against officer form right in our lobby. Anybody can come in and fill one out. Our policy reads that anybody that comes in to fill out a complaint, any officer can help them and needs to help them fill out that complaint. Once that complaint comes in, same thing like Stroud Regional, is the sergeant will give it an initial view. Again, a lot of complaints that come in are very minor complaints. Again, sort of like Chief Lyon said, it might be rudeness or a misunderstanding of policy or the law, things of that nature. A lot of things are, I went through a yellow light and he said it was a red light. So minor disputes like that are generally the lion's share of what comes in. If it's something more serious, obviously then it comes right to me, and then I would assign an investigator either within our department, or if it's more serious, I would request an outside investigator or agency to take over that complaint. As far as discipline goes, again, the same thing that Chief Lyon says is I take everything to my police commission. Again, a lot of them are elected officials and civilian representatives of their communities, and I use them and their life experience and their ties to the community to also guide the direction that discipline takes.
Krista, it's worth noting that the SARP, and I'm sure the same with Pocono, they're open meetings. So there's open agenda. So, we go through the police commissioner reports, and then it is open to the public monthly. Just an FYI, people probably don't realize that.
Sure. Go ahead, Chief Lyon.
I just want to point out one other thing that I think is important in this whole process, and we talk about discipline, and we utilize a program called Blue Team, which has an early intervention system in it. It's a comprehensive use of force reporting system for us. So all reports of use of force have to go into the database. It tracks use of force, it tracks civilian complaints, it tracks all of those things so that we have an opportunity to monitor officers to see who's getting complaints, or, if this one has too many use of forces, or I think tracking things like that for internally for police departments is very important too, to make sure if you have those officers, like, you know, the rogue officers, like everybody's talking about, that you can identify them early.
Thank you. One last question before we move on to the community Q&A. There's also been some concerns and hopes that there would be greater representation within our area law enforcement agencies, and specifically with officers of color, not just on the force, but in leadership. I've heard that several times leading up to this town hall. So I thought I would put that before both of you, Chief Wagner and Lyon. What are your thoughts on that? And are there ways that you could potentially have greater representation?
Well, we would love greater representation. A part of the problem, and this is the discussion we've had year after year after year, is we advertise with several different minority community platforms when we do testing, just to try to get it out there. In the past, we've talked to the NAACP, your past president who was there, and partnered with him to get it out there. I guess our struggle is that we have testing procedures in place that you have to score a certain amount on. You have to get through that process and get onto a certified list in an order, and we go off an order on that list. But absolutely, if you have any other suggestions there, Ms. President, I would be happy to entertain them.
Well, when I get some good ones, I'll send them your way, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
And being on SARP, everybody's a number. They take a written test, they do everything. We get numbers with scores. We have no idea who they are, what they do. It's just, you know, I've been through that process.
Okay, well, we can certainly maybe work on something together, Chiefs Lyon and Wagner, if you're interested, to help, you know, bring some recruits in, maybe go to the HBCUs. That's for another discussion, but I know that's one major concern, obviously, in the community. It's just seeing more people that look like them, not just in law enforcement, in our schools, you know, everywhere. So, you know, one thing at a time, but I appreciate your willingness to help make that happen. Muted.
Muted, sorry.
There we go.
Did you want to read off the questions? You want me to read off the questions? I can read off.
We have 10 minutes. If it's okay, Dr. Brooks, I can pick maybe 3 and just read them.
That's fine.
We'll wrap it up because I know folks probably.
Yeah, actually, there's one in particular I'd really like to
sure, please.
have discussed. It was.
They're good questions, by the way. Really good.
They are. How can funding be provided for body cams for all of our police officers?
That's a great question.
I know the answer. Everybody can sign on to Representative Chris Rabb's resolution to study the effectiveness, the cost, and how we do this throughout all of our municipalities. I'm proud to say that I am a co-sponsor of that resolution, and we hope that it gets through committee really quickly and we get to vote on it and we start working towards that. I believe, and Rosemary can certainly tell me if this is correct, and certainly the other chiefs, state police already are wearing body cameras?
Most of them, I think.
Okay.
From what I've garnered, most of them are, and but you know, I think you won't have 100%. I think, you know, Maureen is right. There's these pieces of legislation. There's a big list. I think we're trying to get the ones that we can really come together on quickly, as we mentioned, to really make the most productive results as quick as we can. And then the ones with more details, we really have to dig through. The one thing, money's always the problem, almost with everything, right? It's terrible. It always comes down to funding and what we can do and what we can't do. And I'm just going to put the reality out there. It's no surprise we're coming off of the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, we right now, as an appropriations member for the House, we are right now a little over 2 billion, almost 3 billion in the hole, and expected to be 7 to 9 billion by the end of May. Now, we're lucky we've got Congresswoman Wild on here. We have money flowing down from the federal government, you know, and then we flow it down to the local governments. So we're really doing our best. We're getting some funds that way, but we're going to have to be careful. And I think this is a really important priority. So we're going to have to try to, maneuver, but financials are a problem right now because of the COVID-19.
Yeah.
If I could just address that, Rep. Brown, you're absolutely right. It always does come down to funding. It is absolutely essential that we get more funding at the federal level down to local municipalities. I am acutely aware as a former city solicitor of how tight budgets are at the municipal level. And and as a result of COVID, of course, we have seen diminished property taxes and business taxes, tax revenues that are going to really impair our ability to, our municipalities' ability to fund vital services. So I'm 100% with you on that, Rosemary, and would like to see our next bill be one that is specifically directed at state and local municipal funding and not with a whole lot of other stuff in it, just about state and local.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, it's a struggle for all of us on the state and federal level with the dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to zip through because we've got about 6 minutes to go. This question would fall with the legislators. Can yearly check-ins with mental health professionals be required of all police officers?
I would think I would first like to check with the chiefs and find out, is that something that they do already? I think it's an important issue. I guess where Rosemary and where we always fall on what is overreach for us, right? Rosemary, what should be left to local control? What do we control? So we see where Chief Wagner and Chief Lyons are saying, within their police department, they have great relationship with their fellow officers. So they would probably know if somebody wasn't doing well, but on the larger departments, maybe they wouldn't. So I would guess we would start with talking to our local officers and our chiefs and finding out, where they fall on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to just add before they answer, I know our PSP has a very robust mental health program for not only themselves, but also their family and support. So they seem to be pretty well equipped with some of their mental health and their resources from the state troopers that I have talked to. But I know the local level may be a different story and not have as many resources. So I'll just add that before all the chiefs give their 2 cents.
Well, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chief Lyon and Wagner. Go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, I can jump in. That's a tough question on whether that could be mandated. I don't have the legal background and that expertise to know what exactly we could enact there. What I will advocate for police officers is that they see a lot of tragedy every day. I know there's a lot of mental trauma that happens with police officers. As a matter of fact, one of my partners many years ago was shot in the line of duty, and he his career ended up being destroyed, and a lot of other things went wrong for him. But that was as a result of post-traumatic stress. And the problem with post-traumatic stress is that it doesn't manifest itself in days or weeks. Sometimes it takes years. It's a slow downward cycle. And before you catch it, it's too late. And people sometimes don't recognize it, just general people, not only police officers, but sometimes just, in our daily lives, we don't recognize the stress and the trauma that we take from life. But especially with police officers, with some of the tragedy that they see and the pressures that they go through, there is a lot of that out there. I certainly always keep an eye on the mental health of my officers, but sometimes you just don't know. Sometimes, again, like we see with everybody, is that can be very well hidden. So yeah, I advocate for anything we can do to help these officers out mentally and to keep them mentally fit.
Yeah, I could say we're all for anything we can mandate for mental health. We had an officer years ago that actually committed suicide who was on the force, and that took a toll in other directions too. The state police are very willing to share their mental health resources with us. and provide counseling and do stuff like that. The FOP, and you can speak on that if you want, Sergeant Wilgus, has resources also available. I think, to be 100% honest, there's still some stigma involved with seeking mental health resources and seeing a counselor, just like a lot of other things in this world today, you know. So I believe that's a hurdle too for police to truly overcome till they embrace it. And maybe mandating it is the thing that needs to happen, to say you will once a year go talk to somebody. You don't have a choice. And
Right.
hopefully they can get the resources that they do need, like Chief Wagner said, before it is too late. We will send people if we see somebody struggling with something and have them get a mental health evaluation. We have done that in the past. But as he said, a lot of times it's too late by the time you start seeing signs manifest.
And I think it's wise of the legislature to have considered House Bill 1910, that mental health evaluation for police, even though it applies primarily within the review, I think within 30 days after a lethal force incident, but it also addresses the SI and has other things in it that are going to benefit officers and making sure they get the evaluations that they need, so that we don't have someone on the job who's suffering from this and then out there making decisions and use of force. So there's a lot that can be done, and we welcome those changes, absolutely.
Krista, may I address this? Thank you. So as one of my primary missions in Congress is to advance the cause of mental health coverage, mental health care. In answer to Chief Wagner, yes, you can absolutely mandate it as part of an employment, as a condition of employment. And I do believe, Chief Lyon, that at least an annual mental health checkup is warranted for all police officers, just as it probably should be for any member of any of our troops who serve in conflict situations. It is a very stressful job. Stress leads to bad outcomes. Too much stress that is not treated is often the cause of outbursts and inappropriate and illegal behavior. One of the things that I've been advocating for and just introduced a bill for was to have funding for mobile mental health crisis services, meaning that trained mental health workers would be able to be dispatched upon a 911 call or whatever number is set up for it, so that in situations where police aren't really needed and where their expertise is not the best, and rather it's somebody who has a mental health issue that needs to be addressed, either attributable to substance misuse or some other mental health issue, to have trained mental health workers go out would relieve a lot of the burden on police officers who sometimes are expected to become mental health workers when that is not, in fact, what they are supposed to be. They're public safety officers. So, but getting back to the issue of police officers, you're absolutely right, Chief Lyon. We have to destigmatize this. And I don't think it is at all inappropriate for us to expect that people in high stress occupations should have some sort of, not only a mental health checkup, but also the ability to seek mental health care without there being any sort of repercussions, so that it doesn't go in their permanent file as something that counts against a police officer if he or she is experiencing PTSD or stress related to on-the-job issues. It's really, really important for everyone, but particularly those in high-stress jobs, that we destigmatize this and make it much more of a normal course of events that somebody would seek this kind of care and treatment. So I'm glad that we're all sort of in agreement about that.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So I do have two more, and so I'll be quick. So Lindsay Bishop is asking, could someone discuss what is being done on a local level to address police use of unwarranted lethal force without prior non-lethal intervention? I bring up the most recent police shooting of Remy Yassin as an example. I don't know if anybody wanted to touch on, just, I guess she's asking, what is the police department's, I guess, policy on obviously using non-lethal measures before going to discharging your weapon? I don't know anything about this particular case, but she's asking that is using that as a reference.
I guess I can answer to that a little bit, Krista. The problem with lethal force is, and our policy clearly states that we will try everything we can prior to using lethal force. In a case where an officer encounters an individual who, say, may be armed with a knife and gives them verbal commands to drop it, and then the individual with a knife runs at the officer, yelling things at him, it gives the officer the right to use lethal force. And unfortunately, sometimes there is no other choice in order for the officer to protect himself and maybe other people in the public that are there. So we have very few shootings here. Over the course of the last 20 years, there's only been 2. Both were unavoidable situations, in my opinion. They were deemed that by outside investigations and our district attorney. And we go above and beyond, in my opinion, really to de-escalate, to not have to use lethal force, to sometimes at the point where maybe putting our officers at a little bit of a risk. But so we have those things in place. And unfortunately, as a police department, everybody sees the bad stuff, but they don't see all the good encounters we have where we actually do de-escalate and disarm people and talk them down and spend, hours on a call with them to get to the outcome we want. And that's all the good stuff that we don't track and we don't report and nobody hears about.
Right. I get you. So we're going to end because we're a little over 9 o'clock. I do have one last question before I'll turn it back to Dr. Brooks, but this is in response to, this is actually something Rosemary Brown and Maureen could answer with respect to the deficit that was brought on by COVID. By legalizing cannabis, we can reduce disproportionate arrests against Black people and people of color, as well as focus resources and officers' time onto serious issues. The Attorney General has stated it would be a much better use of money to end the racist war on drugs. How can we implement this on a state level and obviously county level? Are there serious conversations happening with respect to the potential for legalizing recreational marijuana that would potentially bring hundreds of millions of dollars to the state? Brown.
I'm sure, yeah, it's okay. I'm sure Maureen will actually add too. Obviously, most people who've been watching the Lieutenant Governor, did a statewide travel regarding the full legalization of marijuana. I was a very strong, actually one of the first supporters for the legalization of medical marijuana. And, I'm very much careful about the two pieces because they are very different. You have some people that say, when you look at the social issue of legalizing full marijuana, is it a gateway drug? Is it not a gateway drug? There's all different theories on that. As far as we're over here fighting a whole nother opioid crisis, excuse me, and any other drug issues that seem to be very strong in our society across the nation. So you have that concern. The other concerns are, as we have our law enforcement on, there is some difficulty even with medical marijuana. And, it doesn't say you can drive a car under the influence. So you still have to be very careful. It's difficulty to test for that. And the safety of our roads is a concern with that, on top of what we call drug driving, which seems to be across the board with many types of substances. And the other piece is, if you look at some of the other states, there is some data that shows that the revenue expectations that those states were accounting for early on have significantly dropped. If you're looking at it from a numbers standpoint, I know that there was a part of this question that was on the profiling and a little bit of the arrest portion. But if you look at the number portion, as I talked about the concerns with getting some dollars, once it has been legalized, there becomes an underground market that starts to cut the government's price. And then there's still that market. And so all of a sudden now the dollars you were expecting from the government legalizing it are undercut by a black market, so to speak, on the fact that it would be, off to the side, and it would be something that wasn't, legalized. So I think your concerns with those dollars are not really what we would always expect. There is definitely conversations. I'm not going to say that there's not. There's multiple thoughts, there's multiple arenas, and it doesn't just come down to the money, unfortunately, with that conversation. But I mean, the dollars are there to consider. I get it. I do get it. But it's a much, much deeper conversation on many different levels, and it involves a lot of law enforcement as well.
So
I agree. I think I just wanted to touch on that. Hang on for Maureen. I just wanted to touch on the fact that I think when you look at the high numbers of people of color that are imprisoned due to the sale of marijuana, and then we have dispensaries opening in this county as of tomorrow. And yes, it's for medical marijuana, but the fact still remains that, you know, that leaf is sold in our state to people who need it. And there are thousands of people in jail for this very same thing. So I think a greater conversation may need to be had in terms of this, and maybe some greater research, perhaps. But Madden, I'll let you go ahead and have the last word on this before we turn it back over to Dr. Brooks.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that. So I'm an unequivocal yes on recreational marijuana. I'm already a co-sponsor of Representative Jake Wheatley's bill for one of the reasons you mentioned, that there are people languishing in federal prisons for recreational use, for buying it for their own personal use, who shouldn't be there. Unless we decriminalize it on a federal level and start talking about the research and the different things that Rosemary mentioned, we're never going to be able to do that. It's only ever going to be a cash business. There already is an underground, right? I mean, ask yourself, if you're taking a chance at losing your freedom going and buying weed, wouldn't you rather pay and do it legally? I have to say, by and large, people would say yes. Also, the gateway drug, completely, it's just a farce to me. We have seen in states where recreational marijuana is legal, opioid use is down 25%. Now, I have had a conversation with Chief Wagner with medical marijuana being sold on the street and being cut with fentanyl, and that being a big issue. Not a big issue, but it is an issue. So, I mean, everything we needed to know about the legalization of marijuana or about marijuana was done in a 1930s study by Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia. And it's been 70 years since then. And you can go and have a drink after work, but someone else can't go in their home and smoke pot to relax and unwind. And I just think it's hypocrisy, and we need to stop in this country. And that's where I sit on that.
Well, thank you, Representative Madden. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Brooks, but I did want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. It means everything to the community that everyone here agreed to participate and have an open and honest discussion on what our local law enforcement looks like and the different topics that we mentioned. And Dr. Brooks, I thank you immensely for agreeing to moderate tonight's event. You brought, exactly what I hoped you would. So thank you so much, sir. And with that, I'll turn it over back to you.
Thank you. It was very difficult not to chime in. I have a lot to say about probably every issue that was mentioned this evening, but maybe at another time.
Next time I'll have you as a panelist next time, Dr. Brooks.
Next time, yeah. You're asking a professor to not speak. This has been painful. But thank you all for participating. It is wonderful to see the community come together like this. And Mr. Johnson, I'm very happy for you in particular and everybody who was there that it went well. It was a positive situation, and there wasn't violence by some outside force, because obviously that could have been a legitimate concern. So that's all I have.
So
yeah.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's all I have. Thank you for participating, and good night.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
I just want to thank the Monroe County NAACP for hosting this. It was very much needed, very timely, and very responsible to have this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. It was good to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
See you.
Great
Bye,
forum.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank you,
evening, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
I've said virtual tour, virtual town hall meeting, and a lot has been said. If you get a chance, you can go back and review it. But many things have been said, certainly from our police department and from some of the council and state representative. Our representative Maureen Madeline, who said a whole lot, and there was a lot of things shared that was very positive and very powerful. On overall, I think this was a great town hall meeting, as they want to call it. I think that Krista Casares has put this together and it went well. And I just want to say to all of the leaders in our community, which we have many new leaders in our community, and to Kasim Johnston, who did an outstanding job in the march. It was just a lot. I was very moved by some of the things that were stated. I am so glad that soon some people will be joining us. If you just stay with us just a few minutes. But I'm so glad that you put your questions in and we tried to get them over to them so they could answer them for you. Thank you for submitting them. And some of them were read, and there were many questions already answered. And I hope that you would like to see more things like this, because it's important to you to know what's going on in your community, what is happening, what is open for you to join if you want to participate. And that's very important. So today, I'm just excited about it. I'm very happy of how it went, and as they come on, we will have some people coming to join us, especially Mr. Kasim Johnson. He'll be joining us very soon, and so will Chief Jennifer Lyons. She will be on, and Erica McCabe will be on also, and they'll be joining us. So I'll just give us a few moments, and they're going to come on and join with us. But the other thing I want to say is that as our community grows stronger and we begin to sit down and knit together as far as trying to talk and communicate, we'll find out a lot of things. And some things we'll be in agreement with, and some we will not. Some of us have had different encounters, so some of it did not jive with us that well. But what does make a difference is the fact that we were able to listen. And when you listen, you gain information, and information is power and knowledge. And when you get knowledge and information and you use it correctly, it does something about knitting things together, and it gives you clarity of mind and answers, and you look past the problem and you begin to find solutions. So I'm saying to many of you today, hopefully what you've heard, if there was something that did not connect with you and you felt like they didn't answer your question, then you'll sit down and you'll find a way of getting that question answered. Maybe you'll have a chance to meet them personally and be able to ask them one-on-one about that particular situation that you're dealing with. But most of all, what I want you to know is I want you to think about what it is to come together and sit down at the table and reason. That's what we want to do. And in our faith-based community, to those that are leaders, in the faith-based community, those that are leaders in our schools and our community, I salute every one of you, because you've done a fine job of leading people and trying to keep the community together. And we have to say that. And to all of our police officers, as we said, there are good police officers, we salute them also. And we do have a good police department here in our area, but it needs some work, and we know that. But we're so grateful that we have some good things that are happening within our community with those that are on the law, in the law. So again, thanking you for staying with us just for a few moments as everyone begins to tie on over to us. And I'd like to know your thoughts. Please, if you would, just submit your thoughts down here today, or you can come out to an NAACP meeting, and when they're having their meetings, and join in and be a part of that, or any other community things that are going on. We have some great leaders in our community. We really do, from pastors to radio stations to Sister Chat. There's so many other things that are going on in this community that are very strong people who have come together for one cause, to make our community a lot better. And that's what makes Monroe County very, very, very special. Oh yes, it does. And so we're special because we know how to be able to handle some things. And then I want you to just bear with me just a second, because as we are working on some things, I would like to say to you that greater things are about to happen in our community. And why? Because we are people with great ideas and vision and promise. That's what Kasim Johnson had, a vision and a dream, and he worked with another brother, Dimitri, and they came together and they pulled off with others a great march that young men and women and we in our community can be very proud of today. That's exciting to me. And then, following that, don't forget that the NAACP did one with Mrs. Krista Casores, and they did theirs, and it was very peaceful, and it accomplished what needed to be done. And I think I got most of them on here joining me right about now. It's good to see them. Can you hear me, Chief Lyons? All right. I don't know if she can hear me. Mrs. Casores, can you hear me today? Or is everyone on mute? Okay. Soon they'll be they're about to join in with us. And as soon as they do, we'll be ready. Okay. So, I am here. All right. Is that Miss Lyons? Can you hear me? Chief Lyons?
I can hear you too, Bishop. Good evening.
Oh, good evening. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Ms. Casares. It's good to see you, Ms. Casares. And listen, it has been a great town hall meeting. I want to call it like that. It was fantastic. A lot of questions were answered, and a lot of people gained a lot of information. I wanted to ask you, Chief Lyons, because I've been here for 30 years, and yes, I have to say that our police department has made some great strides, and because it was not always like that. And I'm so glad that we say to you that we've done a good job, and you've done a good job, along with others, in making this police department very safe for us and able that we can work together. And I want to say that I salute you for that. And then to Ms. Casares, I want to say the same to you for how you joined us all together in this meeting, that we gained so much information. I think they could hear me.
No, I could. I just thought maybe Chief Lyon wanted to go first. Bishop Pearman, thank you so much for having me on. It's always an honor to be with you and your viewing audience. Yes, I call it a historic moment because I mean, I've been here 15 years and I don't recall ever seeing all of these people come together to talk about such an important topic as law enforcement. Now, Chief Lyon may have, different information, but for me, I thought it was really important to put all of our law enforcement community and our legislative leaders before our membership and before the general community, because following some of these horrible events we've seen across the country, there were concerns here. Yes, we do generally have good relationships with our law enforcement, but I think following some of those events, it will make anyone nervous and turn to their own law enforcement community for reassurance, right? And to know that we have people like Chief Lyon, people like Chief Wagner, that are strong leaders and that are available and make themselves available to us when we need them, like, making sure that we were safe when we had our vigil, like when the gentleman, led those thousands of people in the march, they're marching, arm in arm with us, and also willing to talk with us about greater representation with officers of color on the force and how we can, make those kinds of things happen. It was just, I thought all in all, it was a wonderful event tonight. Lots of information from right up from the federal level with Congresswoman Wild, right down to Mayor Probst and Erica McCabe King, who serves on the Strasburg Borough Council. It was just a wonderful event, and I hope to have, more of these in the future, not just when bad things happen, but also when good things happen, to celebrate our officers. So I'll end there.
You're on mute.
You got to unmute.
Yeah, I caught myself there.
Sorry.
That's all right. I did learn so much from our talks today, especially from Congresswoman Wild, talking about how the police protection works and how that they are giving qualified immunity and how that affects on the civil aspect of policing. I learned so much about just the different police departments in our area. I work really, really closely with Stroud Regional, and like I told Chief Lyons at the last march that I was at, the student-led march, it's so refreshing to see how well our community works together and polices itself in instances of when we are protesting or when we are working together. It's good to see that our chief was there, the Stroud Regional was there, and how wonderful it all works together. It's just, the one thing that I did definitely learn today is our police commission is not very diverse. And that's something that I think we should really work on, because having a different perspective, like Daryl and Joanne Kachansky, who have lived in the area for so long, perhaps it's time to have a little bit more diversity in our police commission, specifically when it is, we are 20% minority in this community. So
I know the perfect person, Erica.
Who's that?
Right. Are you looking at her? Perfect person.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, I'm like, who? It's been a long day.
Council, I think it all works out for you there.
I'm so sorry. It's been a really long day. It's just, no, go ahead. It's important that we have, that our community reflects the actual community. And I know that our police department does. When the police officer lifted up Rocky Sales there while he was in his chair, we had Chief Lyons and the detectives around peripherally and applauding, and that speaks volumes to the young people that were in attendance, but especially to me as a council member, seeing that what I feel and how I view our police department is how our community views and feels with them as well. So I thought that was just outstanding.
And I'd like to hear from you, Chief Lyons.
Yeah, I mean, this town hall we had tonight was absolutely fantastic. I don't think there's more we could, well, there's always more we could be doing. Let me start that, but this is a fantastic start. We have to listen to the community. The community is listening to us. We're all coming together for the things that a lot of us police officers have been asking for years. So to improve upon this and get some kind of legislature in actual place to be able to put these things in place is wonderful. I mean, it's a win for everybody, which is why we're all at the table together, because we all want the same thing. Our goal is all the same here. And I thank Erica, I thank Krista and everybody for the compliments for our department. I really do believe over the years we have tried, we have gotten better. We will continue to get better. We will continue to learn from our mistakes. And it goes to show we have a great community, though, that supports us too and allows us to become what we have.
I believe that too, and being here. And I know that one thing I did appreciate that you said that you didn't make like the department was perfect. It still needs improvement. And we are glad to hear that as a community, because we do know that we run into some snares here and there. But overall, we can say that we have a great police department and we work very well together. I'm glad to meet Erica McCabe, who's on the Borough Council, and it's good for us to know who's on our council. And by you being on here today, most of our viewers stayed on the entire time. No one left. And so we were glad that that just proved that they really wanted to know what was being said, who you really are, because they travel in and out of state because they work in the city. But now they had a chance to sit and listen to you and hear what was going on. So it makes a big difference to those that are viewing today. And that's why they just stuck right in. Even now they're still coming on. So that's a good thing. And so what I would like to say also is that one of the things that stuck with me was that when we talked about Mayor Probst, she was very good. And I said she could just stay on the wall and not come down, because she made it clear, especially as being a young black male or a black man, it's not just that all lives matter, but black lives do matter, because sometimes they try to group it all into one. And we're really trying to say, yes, we understand that all lives matter, but black lives do matter, because there's a lot of black young men, and I'm one of those young men that sometimes will fear when they have to be pulled over by the police or in a particular area that they don't think that you belong. or you may not live there, that this may be what they have to run into. And so we're trying to figure out how to talk to our children. And I would like to ask you, Chief, if you would tell us, what should we say to our young men and women who, if they're ever pulled over and stopped by the police?
You know, the Monroe County United group, one of the groups that I do participate in, we do, hold on, I got to change my view. I can't look at myself on the screen in big view and talk at the same time. It's freaking me out. We do a role play event for traffic stops. We do it in our high school that our school resource offices are in here in Strasburg. We've done it in Pocono Mountain Regional, Pleasant Valley, several different places. We've done it at East Strasburg University. And it's one of the reasons we need education and conversation between the police and the community in our area, is to have people understand what our job is, have people to understand what their role is as a community member who may be stopped by the police, what their expectations are with us, what our expectations are with them. And I think a lot of it is education and knowledge that makes people feel at ease. You know, a typical thing we would say is people are offended when an officer at night comes up and shines a flashlight in their face. And they say, well, the cop's being rude. You know, there's no reason for them to shine that light in my face, where we're taught on a different side that it's more of a defensive tactic, because we're seeing what's in the car, where their hands are, what might be in close proximity to them that could harm us. So it's conversations like that that are important. To the young people, I mean, if you're stopped by a police officer, the best advice I can give is comply. You don't have to be nice to the police officer. You don't have to be extremely rude either. So you don't have to be there. You give them what they want. And if there's an issue or there's something you disagree with, the traffic stop is not the time to debate that. But afterwards is. If there's been anything done that you think is wrong, that's when you need to go to their headquarters. You need to file a complaint, and you need to let the process take effect that way. Because everybody thinks when you make a complaint, nothing happens, and that's not true. That's absolutely not true. We look for those because it's the only way we can make our officers better.
Well, I know that I told my nephews, when they pull you over, stick your hands out the window. Don't have, that may sound crude to other people, but stick your hand out the window so they don't feel threatened, and you don't have to make them feel threatened. Put your hands out the window. But I think that what you could do is, if you would bring that to our churches, that would be very good, because everybody's not at the college and they're not at the community center, but you can bring that into our churches, and we would welcome that. I know there's a lot of pastors and bishops that would love for you to come into their churches and share with them, with their congregants and our congregation, of what we should do and how we should act when we are being pulled over by a police officer. That's very important. And I hope that as this lifts and we are able to come back into the church full time, in the fullness of it, that you'll be a guest at my church and share that with us.
I would be happy to come in there, Bishop, with myself, and Officer Taylor helps in these role play events a lot of times. He is fantastic. And there's nothing more important than getting out there. So please give my information to anybody else, any other churches, any other organizations you know that would want to do that. We try to get out as many people as we can.
That's
so
good.
Please invite me. We will be there.
Well, I believe you. I've been around you several times. I believe we could talk and you'll make it happen. And that's a great thing. To you, Ms. McCabe, tell us about what you do on the board.
Okay, at council, I always say that council is where the magic actually happens. We control the streets department, your trash pickup. You know, we rule on your taxes and how your day-to-day life actually occurs. So some of the things that we've been working on at council lately have been having our streets paved, garbage pickup, recycling, concerts in the park series, having the parks open up during the COVID-19, that sort of thing. This is something that I only do part of the time. It's not a full-time job, but I am very involved in council, and I have been for the last few years.
That's very good. Forgive me that I did not know that you were there, but I would like to also make sure that you also make yourself available to the faith community, because we need to know who is in office and what they're doing.
Absolutely.
So that we can make sure that we when we have problems, we can say, hey, this is who you need to go see. That's how you build great communication with your community, and we will be responsible as well as you're responsible. We have to give an account to each other. Now, Mrs. Caceres from the NAACP.
Hello, yes, sir.
I know that you're the president, and you're doing some great things, and I mean, it's been wonderful just seeing what you've been doing just within these last couple of months. What do you see for the future of our community?
Oh boy, a lot. I'm super excited and I'm honored to be in this position because I'm able to speak for thousands of people in this county, and that's a great responsibility, but it's also a great honor. And I think the most important thing that we can do, or that I can do, is to help move us forward in any way possible. I'm really looking for feedback from the community, not just about tonight, but about what they are concerned about, so we can have more conversations like these with leaders in our community and get to the bottom of them. There are lots of things that are swirling in my mind. I'm always thinking about different events and programs and ways that we can meet the needs of the community, and that will continue. I actually have 2 that I'm working on now that I'll be able to share with you all really soon. But for right now, I just want to finish my fries here and go to bed. I'm tired.
Okay, well, I understand that, but I have one question for everybody to leave. Everyone said we can get in contact with you. Can you tell us, if you would, Erica, how someone may be able to reach out and be in contact with you?
Absolutely. You can find me on the Strasburg Borough Council webpage. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I try to avail myself as much as possible to all of our constituents and all the community members. I am constantly in the downtown, walking through the area. So reach out to me. I think my email, because I don't remember my own email, is emccabe@strasburgborough.com or .org. But you can find that on the borough website. I do have a website up, ericamccabe.com. You can have all my contact information through that as well.
Okay. Chief Lyons, tell us how we can reach out and get in contact with you or your office.
So if you go into our Strasburg Regional Police website, which is sarpd.com, there's a link at the top, all the contact information for every officer in our department and email addresses in there. So please feel free to email me.
All right. Well, I didn't want to hold you on long because we had been on long enough, but I'm so grateful that you were my guest just afterward. And I want to say to all of you, don't forget that you can have something to say also. If you have a dream or a vision and you have people that can help you walk it out and put it in the right frame and wake up from that dream state, oh yes, I'm sorry. Okay.
I didn't want, yes, no, I didn't want, well, it wasn't about my contact information because everybody knows how to reach me. I'm always on somewhere. My email is president2275@gmail.com. But I just wanted to thank you, Bishop Pearman, for carrying this event live from beginning to end, for, bringing this event to the community, for allowing dialogue to happen, which is so, so vital and important. Giving the community a voice in any way that we can. That's the true leadership, right? Because we talk a lot, but allowing the community to be able to speak for themselves and to make sure that the people who are those two groups are connected, that's what's important. And I just wanted to thank you again and again and again for all that you do. And it's a beautiful night, and I'm very happy that it turned out the way that I think we all wanted. And it was a success. And just thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure, and people who are viewing it's very happy also. I just wanted to say again that in order to make something work, you have to come together with someone. And when you work together in unity, it brings forth strength, it brings forth power, and it unites you in a way like nothing else. And when we get together and we bind ourselves close together to working together, we may fall out, because guess what? Tongue and teeth fall out with each other at times, but you still need your teeth and you still need your tongue. and you can make it work. Other great leaders in this community. Don't think that it's just one person. As I keep saying over and over again, you have great leaders in your community of business, community, in the school system, in the government, within your religious community, but there are leaders right within your home. And I'm grateful to say I celebrate them from Mount Pocono all the way down to Strasburg and all the way out to Pikes County. We got some great leaders, great pastors and leaders that are doing great things. So why don't you, if you are not doing anything, find out what they're doing, join on the band, and support what they're doing, that we can get a job done together. Until we come together again, this is all I have to say. I want to say good night. Thank you to all of the guests that came on, and thank you for joining us. Have a good night.